Go.
So I'm with Jeremy Girard from Mythic Customs, of course, for Horsemen Studio Design. How are you doing tonight, Jeremy?
I'm doing wonderful.
Day 2 of Legions Con was absolutely tremendous. I had a great time. Me and my wife had an amazing time. So just jumping into the questions, when looking at Mythic Legions and Legions Con growth, it's gotten exceedingly larger year to year. The amount of people coming in, having a great time, at any point do you see this being a little bit more than difficult to maintain for yourself and Mr. Viteri? Or would you say that the community has shown enough to prove to the hotel staff and everybody involved that their engineers can and will continue to be better than they were in the previous year, each continuing year?
It's a lot of question right there.
If you want to redo that, because I messed up.
No, you're fine, dude. It's a lot for me to think about because it's a deep question. We don't want to get too big. Part of what I think makes Legions Con so special is that it feels so intimate, right? You mentioned a minute ago that it's welcoming.
Absolutely.
That's what we want. I've seen other shows that they're just focused on growth. The bigger we are, the more people we can get here, the better it's going to be. And then it gets too big, and it loses what really made it special.
Sure.
So, this next year we're going to be right back at this hotel. It's literally the first time we've ever returned to a venue, which is awesome for us because we know things about this venue now that we didn't know before we did the show. So we are focused on putting on the best possible show that we can. We're not concerned about trying to double attendance every single year. We don't have a lot of control over it. There's so many things that go into the attendance. All we can focus on is making sure that we can provide the best possible time for the people that are here. That is what has contributed to the growth, and that's what we'll continue to get.
Absolutely awesome. Thank you for the answer. Of course, my phone locked. So with the reveal of the Valiant Knight showing that there are going to be figures that are representing all 4 factions of the Legions of Light, I can only assume that it's going to be the same for all 4 Legions of Dark. But is there a possibility of seeing characters representing the mercenaries, merchants, and non-faction-based figures in the future years?
Possibly. The Valiant Knight was really meant to be just a fun figure.
Absolutely.
Some of the time, we do so much that's really involved with lore. But sometimes we do things that are just cool, fun to us. The PowerCon debut figures are a perfect example. We always say that they don't impact the lore because we're just making cool things. The Valiant Knight, that features all of the new body parts that we introduced in the Necronomicus
Absolutely.
that have the increased range of motion. So our goal was to be able to get that into fans' hands as soon as possible. So we did the Knight figure, and we didn't want to put it in one specific faction. We wanted to say there are heroes in all, there are knights in all these different factions. Will we ever do something similar for the evil factions? We may. Will we ever do your question led to? Will we do more non-faction like merchants and the townsfolk? People ask us all the time for townsfolk.
Sure.
Never say never. I jokingly said many times that I'm not interested in getting the town baker. Whenever we talk about town folks, people like blacksmith. Yeah, well, blacksmith's a cool. Blacksmith, a tavern, bartender and stuff. Those are kind of cool, but the baker,
The gnomes from down the road in the
gnomes are cool. Gnomes at least have it's a different kind of race and everything. So we definitely have a lot of ideas we want to get to. That's one of the things with Mythic Legions is we've just begun to explore the different races and classes and all that stuff that we want to get.
Tremendous. Of course. If you have time for additional questions, I would love to pick your brain, but if not, it's okay.
Keep going, dude.
Final one. You may have already been asked at this point, but when did you realize Mythic Legions was going to be more than just a figure line?
So, dude, I started as a fan.
Yeah.
The earliest waves of Mythic Legions, I wasn't working for the studio and contributing.
Sure.
I was just buying, I was a Kickstarter back. When it came in, and I started customizing it just became a creative outlet for me. I've always been creative. I had a job that was creative, but this really scratched an itch that I didn't even know I had. The first time that it really kind of blew up a little bit was with the Advent of Decay Kickstarter. The reward I selected was Intern for a Day. We just had Intern for a Day as part of this Mythic weekend. I went to Intern for a Day in 2018, and I got there, and the Horsemen knew who it was, which blew my mind.
Yeah, that's
when they were like, "Oh yeah, we've seen your custom, super cool, super cool." And then a month later, I get an email from Cornboy saying, "Hey, would you like to come back to the studio to be part of this broadcast that we're going to do about a new figure wave?" It was the very first G-Con. So to be before G-Con and be a part of that, that's when I really felt like, wow, I'm being recognized for kind of just what I'm doing creatively, what I'm passionate about. And I struck up a friendship with the Horsemen. I never at that point would have thought that it would have led to where I am today. But that was the first time that I felt like this was more than just a toy line.
Thank you so much for that. Of course, I know that you're majorly influenced with the lore. You're, essentially writing the book.
Yeah.
So, if possible, I did ask Eric these same questions. Would you mind if I pick you for 3 more?
Yeah, dude.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully I say the same things that he said. And these were the same thing.
Matching up.
Eric and I I love working with Eric because we both are about the same age. We grew up in a very similar socioeconomic environment. So there's a lot of times where I'll say to him, like, did you ever watch this cartoon, or did you ever see this, holiday special, or play with this toy? And it seems like everything I was into as a kid, he was into as well. So we literally have all the same cultural touch points. So a lot of times we try to plan things, it just works so well.
Very synergistic way of
It
operating.
is really well. And I've said all the time, with the book and stuff, this is all Eric. Eric built this world. But Eric, it's almost like he's plotting a map. It's like he dropped all the major points on the map where the characters have to get to. I get to say, okay, cool, let me now figure out how characters get from one point to another and why they go there. And then inevitably, as you start doing that, you start finding holes where you're like, whoa, we need to explain this. It just doesn't make any sense. Or I read a bio that doesn't make sense with something else. I have to find a way to work around it so they both actually become canon and make sense. That is super fun. And the fact that I get to do with Eric is really rewarding.
Man, that's really... both of you guys have absolutely said similar things about working off of one another, so I appreciate that going into it. So in regards to Artemis and her parents, the portion of her bio says that she's a fairy elf. So does this mean that fairy elves are their own race in Mythos, or are each of her respective parents one of the respective races, and which of her parents are of which race?
So Eric and I have never discussed that specifically, but my interpretation is the subrace.
Okay.
So just like you have Shadow Orcs and Fury Clan Orc, well, Fury Clan's a little bit different because that's a secret. We'll get to that.
Awesome.
We explain what Fury Clan is in the book. But Shadow Orc is a great example. There are, the true orcs and there are the Shadow Orcs. They're both orcs, but they're different subraces. When it comes to elves, there are wood elves, there are frost elves, there are fairy elves. So it's not that one of her parents was a fairy and one of her parents was an elf. They're actually a kind of subrace.
Okay, awesome. So of course, with the comic book being made non-canon and the changes that are being made to the lore, is it easier to almost act as if we're getting a blank slate with the story-wise, or is it going to be enough crossover between the old and revised story for people to go off of their current interpretations of such characters?
So when we say the comic is not canon, the beginning of the comic where it talks about Selene and Helios creating Mythos, that's all content Eric wrote.
Okay.
That is all canon. What's not canon is the little story that was in the comic.
The scapular kiss.
The scapular kiss is not canon.
Okay.
Okay? I will tell you right now, though, for everyone that likes the scapular kiss, we didn't do it, but I think we did something way cooler. Scapular is the coolest character in Mythos, by the way. He is such a baller. He's this skeleton that really rides a unicorn. He rides a unicorn and he digs like opulence and everything. He digs the finer things in life. He's a skeleton. he can't enjoy the finer things in life, but he surrounds himself with beauty because he can't like experience a lot of it. He makes those. He's a skeleton with a blowgun. He has no lips or lungs to use a blowgun. He's got a blowgun.
It's super fun.
It's so ludicrous, and I love him. He's my favorite character to write. Okay,
Yes.
Eric and I had a conversation once where, because no secret that they're my favorite faction.
Yeah.
And what he said to me was, the Sons of the Red Star should not be in a lot of scenes,
Okay.
but every time they show up, it's the best scene. It's awesome. So
Okay.
I use the Sons super sparingly, but every time I get to write them, they're my favorite to read. They're awesome.
Definitely shows in the Amir and the story that you're writing.
Yes.
I had a lot of fun listening to you narrate, and hopefully, if it ends up on Audible, I get to hear your beautiful voice.
And the Amir was cool because that character came from the book. So the Amir is totally a character in the book that, as we were doing, we knew we wanted to do Scapular too. And we had the idea to say, what would be great? Because we now have the book and we have these, in the past versions of Atlas and Scapular, what if that one figure includes a few extra parts that you can make them their character from the past? In this case, Amir Caspar.
Yeah, that's
so. I mean, from my perspective, something that I wrote in the book now influencing the toy line and getting a version of that, a version of the character is, super, super rewarding.
awesome, dude. Thank you so much.
I don't know if I answered your question. I just went on a tangent.
No, you answered
about Scapular being badass, but
You did say that you could tie the other, the
I
older
was-
version.
I know what
of
it was.
the
You guys
character.
read the comic. So that little piece about the comic where they have Artemis's coronation and the partying in there, like we have elements of that,
Sure.
but the comic was it's very much a one little thing, and there are certain things in the comic that they don't make any sense.
Okay.
So we didn't want to be beholden to it because it was written in a vacuum. It was not, everything in the comic was not written by Eric. They kind of gave the people that wrote the comic a little bit of guidance, and then they wrote that. We don't want to be beholden to that. So we said, you know what? We're not going to focus on the comic. Some of the stuff that Eric had already written to provide them with, that was part of the original brand Bible. That stuff can stay, but we're going to fill out some other stuff.
Is there a possibility, super side tangent on my end, is there a possibility of a Mythic multiverse?
Is there a possibility? Sure.
Okay.
There's a possibility. We've never talked about it, and I don't want to say no because who knows where we'll get in the future, but we definitely don't have any plans of doing multiverse type stuff.
Okay.
It's hard enough to tell one universe of a story. We don't need to start splintering off.
Absolutely. Of course, with the final fun question, with the book being written, of course, the basis of the lore may change, but some of the fans speculated that the Siege of Bjorngard would have been the first major event to happen in Mythos. Does that theory hold any weight, or are we looking too hard at bios that were written almost a decade ago?
So the first major event in the history of Mythos.
Not in the history of Mythos. In the history of Mythos as we know it from the character books.
Yeah.
In recent history, I guess is what it be.
I would not say that it's the first major event.
Okay.
I would not say. I think there's a number of other things that are going to happen that lead to this. There's no one event. Give me a moment.
Yep. I love this, by the way.
The answer is no, because there is a major event that actually is the first domino to fall that causes all of this stuff.
Okay.
Privately, the first major event that leads to what we know as the modern era, the first modern era thing that happens is the Covenant of Shadow.
Okay.
So we've talked about that we have the wave, the Covenant of Shadow. What happens there, and I've read that chapter on my Mythic conversations before. That's really the meeting that leads to where we eventually get for the rise of the Dark Throne. But then there's another event that really is when the shifts start to happen to lead to the rise of the Earth. we know from the toys that we get Erythir, Alithia, Poxus, Necronominus, one after another. So really there's an event that leads to the rise of Erythir that I would say is probably the first major event.
Okay, no, thank you so much for not only an organic, conversational style interview. These are honestly my favorite kind of topics to touch on with you guys. Lore is a big lore whore. I've been that way since I really touched on the line, so I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So I know a lot of people really enjoy. Putting their own look in. They see the characters and they're like, oh, I imagine it like this. You said you're a lore hoard. Do you think it's cool? Like, in your fandom, do you believe there's room for both? We have our lore. If it interacts with, or conflicts with something that you've imagined for a character, are you cool with that?
Absolutely. So there's even situations where, before even collecting in a heavy way with the Mythic Legions line, watching your videos and everybody collecting, you had your own design for the lore for like your Templars. They weren't even necessarily good guys.
Dude, look at this.
I'm telling you. So of course,
he knows
everybody stemming off and doing their own thing is genuinely one of the biggest parts of Mythos for me. So even, not talking about myself in any particular way, one of the funnest things for me to do, I came in this from a video game source. So like Dark Souls is something that I've got a tattoo. So like the idea of respawning and actually healing in a game is something that I directly made a part of that character. So I went ahead and bought a couple of boss fight pieces, and using one of the fairies, it's almost like the character's name is Enlil, but she's attached to the hip at a cage, almost like a bird, but it's not at her, she's not in danger, it's at her, she's being protected by an elf, but having this personal character, he is more or less an elf. So elves, at least in Mythos' normal basis, they're directly opposed to the vampires. Undead in some ways. So hypothetically speaking, if they're in a super bad situation, there's darkness rising, the horsemen are here. So maybe Xylonis Flock does some stuff that they're not necessarily pleased with themselves with, and they bring an undead, they bring a long dead elf who's been buried, and bring him back to life, and they give him a fairy to continuously heal. So every time he hypothetically dies, he still remembers all of this, goes through all of, said pain, but there is going to be a respawn mechanic. There's going to be a healing mechanic based into this character. So that was one of my very first customs. I'm very pleased with that.
It's awesome.
So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Dude, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I hope to speak to you outside of the interview, because this was